Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is the May 25th, 2021 meeting of the Planning, Economic Development, and Land Use Committee. Committee members present. Tom Hoey, he was here. Is he still here? Judy Doche, Councilmember Judy Doche, Councilmember Joyce Love, and additional members present, council members present, Awusu Anani. And for staff, we have City Clerk Danielle Gillespie and our council, John Raphael Pichardo. Tom, did I mention you? Tom, Councilmember Tom Hoey's here.
Brett Williams from Corporation Counsel's office.
Yes, I was just going to say Brett Williams from Corp Counsel's office. And we have from AT&T, Kristen Duffy, Melissa Semide, and Vincent Paquette. And we also have President Pro Tem Kelly Kimbrough has just arrived as well. Okay, I think I caught everybody. Welcome, everyone. We are here today to, we have two resolutions and an ordinance that we're discussing tonight. And we are going to start with, let's see. It gets confusing. It's Selco, right? Or Singular. I'm sorry. AT&T, which one are you folks?
We're New Singular.
You're what?
New Singular Wireless.
Singular, okay.
Yeah.
So that is resolution 384221R, a resolution authorizing a right-of-way franchise agreement with New Singular Wireless, PCS LLC, for installation of telecommunications equipment on city-owned rights-of-way. Okay, so this agreement has been negotiated with the city administration over the past, 6 months or so. And Brett, did you want to say anything on it before we have some conversation with representatives from Singular Wireless?
Sorry, my dog chose the wrong moment. Okay. It was mostly my predecessor on this, Amy Levine, who worked with AT&T on coming up with the agreement. For what it's worth, I think it's a pretty strong agreement that accomplishes what we as the city needed to accomplish, while being, I think, fair to both parties, the city and AT&T. I'm happy to, I don't have any real specific comments. I'm happy to field any questions that either the council or AT&T may have about the agreement, but I suppose I'll let them speak.
Okay, right. Well, maybe we can have them do, I know they have they want to present a little bit about this, and then we can have questions from everyone. And who wants to speak there from AT&T?
So I'll start. This is Vincent Paquette. I'll just add on to what Brett had discussed. It was actually over a year in discussions with Amy, and so there's a lot of back and forth, some negotiations, and we think the agreement as presented is in its final form at this point. It basically mirrors the same agreement as Verizon Wireless. All three parties in tandem negotiated this agreement in good faith, and there was a lot of back and forth. So we hope the city takes that in consideration and approves, for the agreement to progress for signature. And we're happy to answer any questions with regards to sort of anything that we plan on doing with the small cell agreement.
Okay. All right, let's start with questions from council members, committee members first. Tom.
Yeah, hi. I'm just curious, what does the city get out of this agreement? I know you said you negotiated over a year. What do we get out of it? I'm just curious. I've been in the field over 45 years in telecommunications, and I work at the university. I'm involved with the school. Is this agreement, are we going to be able to help like schools and stuff like that get better access using our right of way? And I'm just curious, and is there a financial, are we going to be reimbursed financially for the use of our right of way? Thank you.
Yeah, so the benefit is for, AT&T with small cells in general, the overarching deployment on these is to really relieve your cell towers, right? You'll see installations on cell towers, you'll see them on rooftops, and the primary purpose of a small cell is to alleviate a lot of the data traffic from those macro sites at a more local level. So for instance, you can see the high school, the City Albany High School, we have a node proposed in that vicinity. So when you've got students exiting at 2:30, 3 o'clock, and you've got parents and students and siblings, that network is being taxed at that point in time. That's really the effectiveness of deploying small cells. It really gets to a local level. And you will find that next to houses of worship, you'll find it next to commercial areas, you'll find them next to universities, high schools, elementary schools. There really are city parks. There really are where large folks congregate. And as you can tell, most folks these days, particularly younger folks, right, they just stare at these devices for hours on end. And when somebody's downloading the latest and greatest viral video on Instagram, that's really where the small cell comes in handy.
Well, Vincent, what I'm looking for is you're making money on this, okay? You're going to make money from everybody using their cell phone, whether and Verizon's going to be making money also. But there are people who can't afford it, and especially our schools are, critical to learning, and they need really good data rates and stuff like that. I'm wondering, is there any thought? And again, I wasn't involved in the city negotiation. I'm just a councilman, but I would like to see what more that we're helping out, especially our educational facilities with improved data and being able to get to data. Because right now, I mean, if you don't get a fiber optic line in with a T1, T3 or whatever, you're not getting, what's going on. We're allowing these small cell sites throughout the city, which is going to give you a better saturation and a chance to make more money. So I want to know what AT&T is going to give the city for the ability, you're making a lot of money on this. What are we getting back? I guess that's my question. And I don't know if you're understanding what I'm asking.
So this is Alyssa Semide. I'm the area manager for upstate New York with AT&T. I think that's a bit of a misunderstanding, just to be honest. So we're not really making any extra money on the small cells. We're really doing that to meet our existing customers' demand. Right now, there's just too much demand on our network, and we're trying to make sure that we can meet that demand. So, you had mentioned schools. We want to make sure that students have access to a robust network. And the idea is if we can launch these small cells, we will give them the capacity they need so that they can learn effectively and use their devices when they're in the school. At the same time, we are also paying a fee for the use of the right-of-way. That fee is set by federal law. So that's something that's not really negotiable because there's federal laws that govern that, but there is a fee that is paid to the municipality. But outside of the benefit in terms of coverage and capacity that the small cells serve, we are involved in some public projects that address the digital divide, which is what I think you're really getting at, to make sure that either underserved communities or neighborhoods are getting coverage. And I think Kristen Duffy, she's with our company as well, she can give some more information on that. So Kristen, if you could maybe share what we're doing with the community.
Sure. So thank you, Councilman, for your question, and thank you everyone for allowing us your time tonight. I work as the Director of External Affairs and Legislative Affairs for AT&T, and I'm a Capital Region resident. So AT&T has made, broadly, AT&T has made a commitment, a $2 billion commitment to 3 years to address the digital divide. And we are doing that in different ways. We're offering different programs. Some are student offers, some are through a program called Access AT&T. We also are participating in a program called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, which would be really great information for your constituents to have, and we can certainly pass that along to you. eligible households can apply to be part of the emergency broadband benefit, sort of like a SNAP benefit, and they would receive a $50 a month credit towards procuring whatever it is that they need. So say your household maybe only has one student in it and you could live with a hotspot, you could procure that. Or if you have more students than that and you need a wireline connection, then you can procure that as well. So that's another thing that we're participating in. On the state level, we are the lead vendor in a program called Connected New York, which is an emergency fund. I think it's set up to fund 50,000 students who are in underserved areas, free connectivity. And then as well as within the city, we have done a number of things over the last couple of years. And most recently, we're getting ready to announce that we donated 1,000 hotspots and 1 year of free wireless connectivity to Albany students. And we're working right now too on a digital literacy summer camp with the Police Athletic League that'll focus on students right in Albany. So I hope that answers your question on kind of how we're working to bridge the digital divide, and you specifically by expanding your capacity and your network right in Albany will help do that.
Okay, Tom, did you have anything else?
Well, I'd just like to comment that to say that, this is going to provide more data, and the more data that goes through, the more money you're making on the data, because most of the plans are not unlimited, and you do throttle people if they're heavy users, and we know that, and it's based on the, how many megabytes and stuff like that you're getting. And you're here to make money. I understand that. But let's talk about telecommunications in general. When phones were first introduced, it was a natural monopoly. And the government said, you're able to do this, but we're going to regulate how much you can charge people. Now, wireless comes around and it's unlimited. You can charge whatever you want. And it's the marketplace competition, throttles how much money and, that we have to pay. And, what's been happening, we had the 1984 Judge Green decision where they broke up AT&T into all the, the 7R box and stuff. But what's going on over the years since 84 is all these telecommunication companies have bought each other out. So there's only 3 or 4 large wireless distributors. So, there is money to be made. And, my other concern is that when we go from the wired network to a wireless, there's no unions. And I know it's not as much with AT&T as it is Verizon, but I do have concerns. So thank you for your answer. It is what it is, I guess.
Okay, other committee members with questions or comments?
Councilmember Doshi has her hand up.
Okay, Judy.
Thank you. Kathy, I do have a number of questions. So feel free to, cut me off and let somebody else jump in if, I don't want to monopolize this. I want to let other people have an opportunity.
Okay.
So my first, I want to make sure that people have a little bit of the history here. The planning board, the planning department was working on standards. The planning board passed standards, approved standards that then were supposed to come to the Common Council for our action. So they did that, I think about 18 months ago, the planning board. So there are standards that have been approved by the planning board. I have 2 questions along these lines. One is whether all the standards that were approved by the planning board are now incorporated into this agreement and into the draft ordinance. And the second thing is, so I see in the resolution, it says that these agreements require public council approval. So I assume the carriers know that because they've been negotiating agreements with a lot of other municipalities. The administration knew that. And especially given that those standards were pending, we asked for staff to produce an ordinance that actually reasonably reflected incorporating those standards, with public health count, with the Common Council approval, as opposed to being given. Initially we were given an ordinance that basically just said that the chief planning officer can approve whatever standards he wants for these. But it was always expected that there were going to be standards and that we were going to approve something. So that happened 18 months ago. And I'm wondering why it is that neither the carriers nor the administration came to us before this, before I'm hearing AT&T say the agreement is complete. That's not my understanding. My understanding is we need to approve it. And it would have been appropriate for us to have been involved in the discussions before this, before it's finalized. So the two questions are the standards that the planning board actually approved incorporated in toto into these agreements, and then why is it that the Common Council was not involved prior to this?
Brett, I think that's directed to you.
As far as the second question of why the council wasn't involved in the negotiation, I mean, generally the negotiation of contracts, most contracts the city enters into is more of an executive function than a legislative function. So I think that's part of the answer. I wasn't privy to all the conversations that various council members may have had with Amy, but I think Amy at least had some conversations with some council members about the negotiation of these contracts. And I think when we say
Brett, I just want to address that. She contacted me about a month before she was leaving to let me know that she had been in discussions and negotiations. And then at that point, Ann also was working on the ordinance that we had met on 18 months ago. She did not let me know at that point, essentially, that the negotiations were near complete. She gave me the impression she was working, prior to that, she had given me the impression she was working on the ordinance. She didn't say anything to me about negotiating the actual agreements that then would be coming before the Common Council. It seems to me as though, we put the cart before the horse in terms of there was an ordinance, it was pending, we had a meeting, it was understood that staff was going to be coming back to us with an ordinance that might be viable for us to actually adopt. I had no understanding until about now 2 months ago that she was actually negotiating these agreements.
I agree completely with Judy on this. We should have been notified much earlier on the negotiations, and we would, ideally you want an ordinance in place. So I don't know, you also asked the question about standards approved by were they approved by the planning board? Are they in the resolution and ordinance, Brett?
Obviously the ordinance has been introduced now. And as far as the contracts themselves go, I think a lot of the things that are covered in the ordinance are addressed in the contract. I mean, the ordinance actually mirrors the contract in a lot of ways. I don't know if the contract actually spells out all of the aesthetic standards and other things that the ordinance will spell out as written. But I suppose also that any, once the ordinance is passed, which I assume will happen sooner rather than later, once that's passed, any applications that AT&T or any other carrier attempts to take out with the city, those will be subject to the ordinance and have to comply with the standards and the aesthetic standards and all other standards that the ordinance puts into effect.
The ordinance actually has very few standards in it. And what the planning board approved and what we were on notice as to standards was, I think, I don't know, 15, 20 pages worth of standards that were going to be considered.
Okay.
I don't,
I do think that's a concern here, absolutely, that our ordinance could be made more complete.
What would the committee propose be more? Because the aesthetic standards and all that are controlled by the FCC order. So I'm just wondering what other ideas would.
Well, I think I sent an email to, I was looking at the New York City, you know, what they do in New York City, and I was looking at their franchise agreement with, I think it was AT&T, and you know, it's 77 pages long. So they go into very specific detail about all types of things. You know, just the actual shape and color, the type of paint that's used for these boxes, in just you know, there's just so many different areas. I also noticed that they had a way, I mean, one of the big concerns here, and Tom started to talk about it, is that we have no assurance of these you know, wireless facilities being placed in our underserved neighborhoods. And that's what this council wants. We want, you know, we have a very strong equity agenda, and we want people in our underserved neighborhoods to be able to, you know, be connected to the internet. And this agreement doesn't give assurance that that will happen. I mean, it doesn't have assurance, is what I'm saying. So, you know, and you know, it's great that we're hearing that AT&T has done a great deal out in the community with the hotspots. But I have to say, with the hotspots, I mean, oftentimes people will get overcharged. You know, there are limits. Those are really Band-Aids, and you know, the other funding that has taken place is all terrific. But I think we really want assurance that these facilities are going to be set up in our underserved neighborhoods. I don't know how we're going to achieve that, but right now the ordinance and these agreements don't reflect that. So that's my thoughts on it. Judy, you had other questions?
Well, the other question I had with regard to the fee, I understand that currently the FCC has established a fee. And I believe these agreements simply put that particular fee in there. It's possible at some point that the FCC could make a different decision and allow, and frankly, the fee is minimal for
Judy,
what's-
I apologize. I'm going to jump in only because I have read differently. They say, I think these are suggested fees, strongly suggested fees, but I don't know that they're hard and fast fees. Maybe someone from AT&T can comment on that.
They are. I mean, they are hard and fast fees promulgated by the FCC. They are caps on how much can be required. So that they're not guidelines. That is.
I would like to see proof of that because I have read differently that is not the case. Where can we find that information?
Melissa, I'll just
We
add,
can provide you with the infrastructure order. I'm sorry.
I would like to see that.
Melissa, there's also verbiage here that in the event the FCC changes their stance on rates and fees, that those rates and fees will apply when the FCC order is if it's changed downstream. So if there are any
What
adjustments to
happens-
fees and rates, it'll get changed for the city as well.
What happens though if the FCC decides that municipalities have some flexibility with regard to the fees it charges? And there's no, there might be recommendations, but there is no fee per se set by the FCC.
We could renegotiate the agreement at its expiration, at the term expiration, if that's your concern.
So in 3 years, the agreement is for 3 years? You're saying we're stuck with the FCC rates as is in this agreement for the 3 years, even if next week the FCC decides that there's going to be some flexibility?
I mean, the agreement reads that if the FCC changes its regulations, we can renegotiate that portion of the agreement. So if the FCC changed its fee regulations to it's up to the discretion of the municipality, we could then renegotiate at that time if that's the way the FCC guidelines read. I don't anticipate the FCC changing its mind in a week. It took them quite a long time.
I know, I'm just.
Infrastructure orders. But yeah, there is language in the agreement that allows for renegotiation if the current regulations change. So that would be an option if that happened.
I didn't quite read it that way. Let me see if I can bring it up. I gotta fess up, guys. I had no idea when I went to my eye doctor appointment today that they were going to dilate my eyes. So I'm a little bit disabled here.
I have a lot of noises going on outside my window, so I'm trying to stay on mute as much as possible, but the relevant section is section 8, subsection E of the contract. It's on page 6 onto page 7.
Thank you for that assist. Let me see if I can. Kathy, while I'm looking that up, I'll defer to other council members.
Kathy?
Mr. Hoey has his hand.
I'm sorry, Tom. Hold on a second, just for a second. I want to just go over the costs that are reflected here. It's $500 per application, and you can have up to 5 facilities. Those are the boxes and whatever else is connected to them. And then it's $100 for each additional facility. And then those are one-time costs. And then for use of our right-of-way, you get, the city would get $270 per facility per year. And let's see what else. That's for a new pole, I think. Oh no, that's for, yes, per facility per year. And $1,000 if a new pole has to be set up, and that's a one-time fee. And I think I'm missing something on that. It's I think it's $135 per facility if they co-locate. Is that it? Brett?
It's 270, so it's 270 per year.
It is. There's
For all
no,
returns.
okay. Okay. All right, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about, because somebody had brought up about aesthetics. And I sent JR right before the meeting a picture of the telephone pole on my block that's damaged. Woodpeckers got into it, and there's huge holes on the bottom. And it's also bent. And when the company came to put up the small cell site, I showed it to them, and they didn't care. They said, well, we don't care. At some point, that pole's going to come down, and it's going to take all the utilities that are on it. So I do have a concern about how they choose which poles to use. And then the second thing is what we heard about 2 years ago. People came home from work, and all of a sudden there was a metal pole with the small cell on it right in front of their house. How do we deal with that type of situation where the location of these independent poles will be placed? Is there anything in the ordinance to control that? Thank you.
Okay, Brett, did you want to respond to that at all? Or someone from AT&T? Who's best equipped to respond?
Was the question just about the fees?
No. No, he was asking about placement of poles, that poor placement. How do we ensure that these poles are placed in areas that don't impact people's views and so on and so forth, that they're put up in.
So this is Vincent with AT&T. I think the question was two-part, right? How do we go about choosing the poles and the locations that it serves?
Correct.
And he had mentioned also potentially having a particular pole in his neighborhood that could be structurally not capable of handling additional loading. So we as consultants for AT&T, AT&T's RF team identifies the need. We search structures, and not all National Grid and Verizon co-owned poles are available for our use. There are only any poles with major electrical equipment are not available for AT&T to use. So we try to pick a cleaner, less cluttered pole and submit that candidate information to AT&T's RF team. They pick the location, and then we have to submit an application to National Grid and Verizon to, they survey the pole, they do a visual inspection of the pole, and they do a pole loading analysis. AT&T also does its own pole loading analysis to ensure that the additional loading is capable to handle the equipment. And the second part to that question, I believe, was regards to aesthetics. And the small cell standards now, it's 12 pages long. And in my opinion, is extremely detailed with regards to the locations in the city, the types of structures within the city, to be more aesthetically pleasing than others. So in my view, it's really, really detailed. And it's actually pretty challenging to pick the locations that you're looking for us to attach to or to build new structures in. So it's a very detailed aesthetic standard, and it's very complete. It's more complete than most communities that I've seen throughout the Northeast.
Where does the agreement say you have to comply with those standards?
There is a provision here. If you give me a moment, I can come back to it. So section 4 deals with the right in the first paragraph A. We have to submit permit applications to the planning office. And in the first provision, it says that carriers' proposed locations are in compliance with all applicable laws and consistent with the aesthetic standards.
One of the things that came up, and I understand and I appreciate that you're more detailed, but does homeowners, if somebody owns like a house or a piece of property, will they be notified before this, all of a sudden a pole appears in front of their house? We had this problem like 2 years ago. There was newspaper stories. I had phone calls. I know other council members had phone calls. We didn't know what was going on. But that's a big concern, especially, you know, public relations, that, you know, all of a sudden a pole shows up in front of my house that I wasn't counting on, and, you know, on my lawn, because that's, a lot of places don't have sidewalks in the city.
Yeah, that's a fair question. And your aesthetic standards, your design standards, and then presumably your future ordinance is going to address that. But your design standards already dictate that there's a 250-degree radius for about a notification. So by comparison, most other cities and towns, because the structures are generally smaller, right? They're not 180-foot guide towers or monopoles. You usually typically have to notify just folks within the vicinity. So if it's in front of your house, you're going to notify that individual. If it's across the street, you got to notify that. So to me, a 250-foot radius is in fact, it's plenty notice for the folks in the area.
And Councilmember Hoey, the revocable sidewalk privilege application that's attached to the agreement is Exhibit A. That does lay out that the applicant shall provide notification in a format acceptable to the city that an application has been submitted for review to all affected property owners within a certain radius. So,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions and comments? Judy, did you have anything in addition? I know you had a long list, but are you all set?
Well, I mean, there's the agreements, and then there's, you know, questions about
The ordinance.
the ordinance, right?
Okay. Well,
And Kathy, I share your concern about essentially a different kind of form of redlining. You know, with regard to not providing enough service in underserved areas. And the only language in here that provides some level of protection says the carrier will not unduly discriminate against any underserved wards. So unduly, they can have their own criteria for what thresholds need to be met with regard to people contracting with AT&T or Verizon, except, you know, having contracts in a particular area potentially, and justify not providing service in an area based upon fewer individuals. Am I correct? Do either one of the carriers want to dispute that? I mean, I think unduly discriminate, will not unduly discriminate is pretty broad.
I won't dispute that, and I can tell you that you're probably going to hear the same thing from Verizon, which is that, you know, ultimately we base our build plan on RF need. So wherever we see the greatest holes or the greatest demand for coverage, that's where we're going to put the small cells, because that's what they do. It fills in the holes where we need coverage. So we don't discriminate based on underserved neighborhoods, but we also wouldn't necessarily deploy a small cell in a neighborhood that doesn't warrant it based on our coverage and capacity objectives. So, you know, when we say we won't unduly discriminate, we won't discriminate, period. We're not going to be discriminating on underserved neighborhoods, but all of our network deployment, all of our resources are based on RF need. So that's how we
are based on what? Are based on
need.
what? Oh, need. Okay. Need. Your definition of need.
yeah, we understand that, you know, you're a business and so on. We're trying to address the needs of people who live here in the city. There's been a lot of information that we've talked about here, but I don't know that I I think people, my guess is that committee members need to digest some of this. Unless any other committee member or other council members wish to comment, I'd like to suggest that we take some time to digest what has been discussed tonight, and then we'll get back together and at the next meeting to make some kind of decision.
Kathy,
Mm-hmm.
I think we received a PowerPoint presentation from one of the carriers, and I'm wondering if we want somebody to go over that PowerPoint presentation so we have that information at this point.
JR, that was Verizon.
That's for Verizon.
Yeah,
that's
so
for
we
Verizon.
can,
They're coming in next.
we can request that, or, you know, I think that's a good idea.
Oh, so are we dealing? This is a public meeting.
It is, but JR, I think invited Verizon to come at 6:30.
Oh, okay.
So we do have a little timer. So unless there's anything else, I'd like to say thank you to all the people here representing AT&T, and we will be back in touch with you to let you know when the next meeting is, and we'll make a decision then.
Thanks so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you for
much.
coming.
Okay, let the record show that Councilmember Alfredo Ballerin has joined us. Okay, so they're not here, right, JR? They're not going to be.
They're here. They're
Oh, they
in
are
the waiting
here.
room if you're ready.
Okay. Any other thoughts people want to? Well, now we're going to listen to. This will be resolution 374221R, a resolution authorizing. We'll let them in, JR. This is Cellco Partnership doing business as Verizon Wireless for installation of telecommunications equipment on city-owned rights of way. Okay, why don't we go through and do introductions again? Welcome everyone from Verizon
Hi, Chair. How are you?
Wireless. Hi. We're going to do some introductions. I'm Kathy Fahey, Chair of the Planning, Economic and Development and Land Use Committee. Other committee members, Councilmember Judy Doche, Councilmember Tom Hoey, Councilmember Joyce Love, and Councilmember Alfredo Ballerin. Other council members present, Owusu Anani, and President Pro Tem Kelly Kimbrough. And we have staff, Danielle Gillespie, our city clerk, and our council, John Rafael Picharda. And I see we have, maybe you folks from Verizon can introduce yourselves.
Sure. Thanks, Chair. And thank you, other council members, for giving Verizon an opportunity to meet with you all today to talk about small cell agreement. My name is Chip Lawrence. I'm with Verizon State Government Affairs Department. Work right here in Albany, born and raised in the capital region. And with me today, we've got Mark Kuhn from our wireless network team. We've got Maggie Hayes, also from the wireless network team. And we've got Dave Brennan from Young Summer, who is outside counsel for Verizon.
Okay, well, welcome, folks. So we're here to discuss the franchise agreement that was negotiated. And my understanding is that you're able to do a presentation. You have information you'd like to share with us.
We do. I'd like to kick it over to Maggie if you'd be inclined, and we'd like to walk through a quick slideshow that kind of just gives a 30,000-foot view of what a small cell is. I know there's probably varying degrees of understanding of the small cell technology, the benefit that it will bring to the community. And then from there, take any questions from the team.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
thanks, Chip. just want to say hi and thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to kind of share some information with you. I did send out a PowerPoint. Hopefully you all have it. It just gives kind of a high-level overview of small cells, why they're important, what they do, why we deploy them, where we deploy them, and kind of how we're trying to work with municipalities to forge this relationship to better bring wireless services to communities. I'm not going to go through this slide by slide. It's more of kind of an information packet for you to go through. I do want to draw your attention, though, down to slides 10 through 13, where we kind of give you a visual representation of what these look like.
Maggie,
They are,
Maggie, is that
Yeah.
something we can share so that people can go through that? 'Cause we
yeah,
don't
do you,
have-
do
we
you
don't-
guys receive it? Oh, you don't have it, okay.
No. Or
Well,
I
JR
don't know
does.
if I can say it. Oh,
There
okay.
we go.
Oh, there it is.
JR.
Okay. Yes, thank you. So slide 10. So when we say small cell, and I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with the technology and with the terms that we use. A small cell is exactly like what it sounds like. It's instead of our big 150, 200-foot towers with the 8-foot antennas on them, technology has developed to the point where we can slim those down to be exactly what you see in the picture on the left, which is a small 4G canister on top of the pole with the equipment cabinet about 3/4 of the way down. So that's what it looks like. And we kind of just compared it to what you might see with a transformer and a utility box, just to kind of show you a comparison of what they look like. It's pretty similar. So a lot of places where we do put these up, people rarely notice it because it looks like equipment that's already on the pole. We use these in place of the big macro antennas to kind of supplement those macro antennas. The macro antennas, 8-foot antennas, they go probably for a couple miles, right? They provide service to neighborhoods in 3 different directions for miles. What we're seeing is with the increased use in technology, I mean, instead of 1 smartphone, people have 2 or 3 smartphones. We're looking at probably 10 to 15 devices per household these days. So there is a demand for capacity that we're kind of struggling to keep up with. So these small cells only cover about 1,000 feet in each direction, and they're used to relieve the capacity on those macro towers so that the macro towers can better serve the areas that surround the communities.
And when you're,
these-
Maggie, I'm sorry, when you're talking about the
No, you're
macro,
fine.
when you're talking about the macro
Yeah.
towers, you're talking about those huge cell towers, correct?
Yeah, yep, they're what you typically think of as a macro tower. They're about 150 feet, 200 feet tall. Usually there's more than 1 carrier on them. They have the 8-foot antennas. They're the ones that we usually have to lease out a big parcel of land and go through a couple zoning meetings. And they've been around for years, probably 20, 30 years. So this
Okay.
technology for the small cells has probably came about, I would say 7 to 10 years ago, where we've been doing this. And this is much more specialized to target specific areas where we see capacity being needed. So they need additional capacity in certain areas. These come in, they target a specific location, which is also why we need more of them than we do the macro towers. They don't go as far, and it's much more specialized to a dense area of people. So this is an example of 4G. And then if you go to the next slide, down to number 11. Yep. So these are just some more examples of what they look like. These are different poles. You can see the metal decorative poles, which make it a little less like a utility pole. And then if you go to the slide down, I actually have a couple examples of poles that we have installed in both Syracuse and Schenectady. We have a couple of these, probably, I would say about 12 to 15 that are activated in Schenectady specific to 5G. So you can see the Syracuse light pole on the left and on the right. The one on the left is a 5G, but you see the 5G antennas on top. And the benefit with the 5G is there's no additional equipment cabinet needed. All the equipment is fused right to the antenna, which makes it smaller and less intrusive on the poles. So the middle pole that you see there is a multi-use pole. It has the 4G antenna on the top, and then those flat panels that are right below that are the 5G antennas. And all the equipment is housed in the base of that pole. And then the picture on the right is just another example of one that we did in Syracuse. And then if you go to the next slide is where I have a couple pictures of ones that we have on there in Schenectady right now. So those have just been installed in the past couple months in Schenectady.
Do you have any photos of situations where there's been co-location with other carriers?
Not yet. The reason why is so these antennas, because the radios are infused directly to the antenna, we cannot share them with other carriers. Each carrier would need to have their own antennas. And we have not yet come across a situation where we have needed 5G service in exactly the same pole as AT&T or T-Mobile have needed it. So we have not yet seen a co-location of 5G antennas on poles. They do make multi-carrier metal poles that can house 2 to 3 carriers inside that pole with the equipment in the base, just like the one that we saw on the previous slide, that can be used for multi-carriers. So it is an option. We just have not come across it yet.
Thank you.
Yep. So I wanted to just kind of show you a visual representation of what we're looking to do and what these are going to look like when we actually get them installed. The reason why we pursued this agreement with the city is, first of all, we have agreements in place with most of the major utility companies across upstate New York: National Grid, NYSEG, Avangrid, Con Edison. So we have agreements with them to co-locate this equipment on their utility poles already. With the direction that the technology is going, and given the fact that once you start talking about 5G, 5G goes even not as far as 4G goes. So if 4G goes probably 1,000 feet, the 5G signal probably goes about 500 feet. So these are going to need to be a little bit more around than even the 4G small cells are. So to utilize that and for speed to market, and because utilities are already there, targeting existing utility poles in the public right of way is the easiest and fastest approach that we have seen to do this. So in order to do that, we also wanted to approach the municipalities to come up with an agreement that basically allows us to utilize the right of way and put our equipment in the right of way while paying the municipality basically cost recovery fee for use of that pole and use of that space. So that's the reason for the MLA, why we've been pursuing MLAs with all these municipalities, and kind of why we're targeting the right of way, because of ease of access. Utilities are already there. It's less obtrusive. We don't have to deal with private landowners. And the MLA should also help to streamline the process for permitting purposes, which we've done a couple, I think, small cells in the right of way in Albany, working with the city planner to get a building permit. So we have done a couple of them. But for these 5G ones, and I mean, I believe you guys are probably aware a little bit of the FCC order. But the FCC stepped in and kind of tried to make a streamlined process for this to help 5G get to these communities faster. Let's stop and see if anybody has any questions on that.
Any questions?
Yes.
Tom?
Hi. My name's Tom Howie. I'm a councilman, 15th Ward. I've been in the telecommunications field 45 years. I work at the University at Albany. I'm a network design engineer. I have some basic problems. I consider a small cell in my house. It's called wireless. But my problem is I can't get a broadband access to it. Verizon in other communities have brought in Fios, and we're being told there's no Fios. Now, I understand, and I guess my theory on this is, on the wired side, you have to have, it's a unionized workforce. But with the wireless, it's not regulated, so you can have whatever workforce you want. So I have a problem with that. And we know that, whether you want to say it or not, 5G is going to be the way to get broadband into the house. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of it coming up in a few years. And I did grill AT&T saying, what do we get out of this? You're going to be making a lot of money on this. And AT&T felt, well, we're not really. You are. You're going to be pushing more data, and most plans charge by data. So my concern is for schools and for educational, you know, like colleges and universities, we're forced to pay the, you know, we actually invented the internet that's making all this stuff happen, but we're being forced to pay top dollar. So is Verizon planning, or, you know, public relations, what are you doing to help those who can't afford this digital divide that we have? And my second thing is the aesthetics of the pole. There was a pole put on my block. I'm sorry, a small cell put on the pole on my block. The pole was, woodpeckers had gotten into it and there's huge holes on it. I sent the pictures to JR and I'll be glad to get them to you. When the guys came to put the small cell in, I talked to them, I showed them the pole. The pole's actually bent and is gonna break at some point, and they continued to install it anyhow. I am concerned about that. You know, in a bad storm, that big antenna up there, it's going to catch more wind. That pole can't snap. And I've seen poles snap in storms in my neighborhood. So I have two things for you. What is Verizon going to do for us with the digital divide and aesthetics? What can we do to make aesthetics a little bit better? We had a case a couple of years ago where a person came home from work and all of a sudden there was a pole in front of their house. Is there anything we can do for that? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll talk, I'll let Chip jump in on the digital divide stuff, but as far as the aesthetic goes, I mean, I know Albany has a pretty hefty aesthetic guideline package that we are required to follow per the MLA. And traditionally, when we work with National Grid or VZT, whoever the pole owner is, we have to do some sort of structural report on that pole before we can even attach our equipment to it. And a lot of times, if it's not structurally sound, we have to, at our own cost, replace that pole before we're allowed to attach our equipment to it. That's standard practice, so I'm sure ones get missed. I hate to say that that's probably accurate, but with the amount that's happening, or if it's also AT&T or T-Mobile, I don't know who, if it was us or who it was, but we do work with National Grid and those pole owners to make sure that those poles are structurally sound, and 9 times out of 10 we have to put a new pole in. As far as college campuses go, I know that this isn't SUNY Albany, but we are working with the University of Buffalo on a program with them to put in some 5G antennas around their campus so that they can test some 5G equipment and bring better service to their students. And not related to 5G, but we also are currently working with SUNY Albany to put in a big indoor system in place to help enhance the wireless coverage in that building. So I know a lot of those buildings are big and brick and old, and it doesn't get a lot of coverage, especially the tunnels under the university. So we do have a pretty close relationship, especially with some of the bigger universities around upstate New York, to try to help them with their wireless coverage and to enhance that service for them there. As far as the digital divide goes, I think Chip is probably a little more qualified to talk on that, unless you have any other questions directed to aesthetics.
Yeah, well, so BIOS, how come Albany can't get BIOS?
That I don't know. I don't really deal with BIOS. I don't know, Chip, if you have a good answer for that.
You can't get it because it wasn't, the agreement was never reached with the city to deploy FiOS. And what I'll say is there were other municipalities across upstate, 15 years ago as well, that agreements were not reached. And here we are at the table, asking to, for the city of Albany, to not miss another bite of the apple. This product has FiOS-like speeds and will run throughout the streets into the businesses and the residents throughout your community, giving you that FiOS without having the wire to the home. I often say in meetings at the Capitol, a lot of the staff members are younger than I am. I have children that are teenagers. That demographic doesn't want to be wired down, whether it's a home phone. The majority of Americans, the majority of New Yorkers do not have a home phone. They use this as their home phone. Now we're seeing them use this and iPads as their main tool to access the internet and even to watch TV through broadband streaming services. So the demographics have shifted, the behavior of the industry, frankly. They are the ones pushing us based on the usage. We are seeing exponential growth in wireless data usage that started before COVID and has only been exacerbated during COVID. So we would be competing with ourselves to then put a FiOS network. But to be clear on some of those pictures that Maggie put up, the reason we must use the right of way and attach to existing utility poles, these small cells all have fiber optic cable connected to them, and they all require power. So it's a natural location for them which happens to put them right out in front of the homes, right out in front of the businesses, right out in front of the libraries, right out in front of the schools. So this is the next opportunity, and it's where technology is going due to the demand from the demographics. I did want to also, you mentioned the digital divide. I'm extremely proud of Verizon. I started out as a technician in Schenectady and Albany in the 90s. Now we're all one company, wireless and wireline. I think Verizon is an absolute leader in trying to solve the digital divide. We are often in conversation with our federal team at the FCC. We are a major participant in the emergency broadband benefit. We see that need here and now in our faces, in our families, needing broadband to work, to now school, apply for jobs, telecommute with your doctor, right? There's a lot of things, and there are programs there. We say that emergency broadband benefit is fantastic, but frankly, it's temporary. We are asking Congress to integrate a long-term solution, and we want to see the families in need empowered, just like they are with SNAP benefits and HEAP benefits. They get that SNAP benefit card and funds are loaded onto that card every month. So they have the empowerment to go to market and purchase what they need specific for their families, which is unique to each family. Same with a broadband offering. They should be loaded with a benefit and then select a package that best suits their needs. It may be a single mom with a young child that needs really minimal 25 meg speeds. It may be a family of 6 with 4 teenagers you've got 6 users all day and they need 200 meg or more, up to a gig. So tailoring it to let that consumer have that choice and empowering them is what we are advocating at the federal level to solve digital divide. Obviously, with that, the network needs to be in place. And we did share with Mr. Pichardo. I hope he shared it with all of you. And if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, I welcome a call offline with any one of you that wants to talk about what Verizon has done specific in New York, more about the EBB. We put out a white paper, and our motto is accelerating America. We recognize this and we must solve this together, right? It's not an industry alone to solve the digital divide. It's forward-thinking policymakers like yourself that recognize it as well. And what is the path to success? You've got to get industry to build, and then that's the accessibility. We've got an affordability piece, which we just spoke about, right? There needs to be some help and some assistance at the federal level. And there's billions of dollars out there, but let's get a permanent fix in place so that it doesn't go away, December 31st, if life goes back somewhat normal out of COVID. It needs to be a permanent enhancement given to these families. And then also adoption. So there, I laugh a little bit. My kids are 13, 14. They have no idea how to use a rotary phone. And my mother enjoyed being able to teach them something like that. Conversely, my mom doesn't know how to download an app or use her phone as a remote for the TV. So the youth are in a perfect position, but also industry is to help educate those that have not had enough exposure, and we help that adoption. So just getting it there and making it affordable. How do I use it? And that's the third component there of our white paper.
Thank you so much. That was a good explanation.
Okay, and then you had mentioned the poll where I think Verizon is in the most unique position compared to other wireless carriers that are out there. We are also a wireline company. Councilman, I would love to connect with you in Albany. If you've got details and pictures, please, if you could get them to me. We are a pole owner. So even Verizon Wireless, as Maggie alluded to, they sign agreements with Verizon Wireline as that pole owner along with National Grid. And we have that responsibility of maintaining that network. If there's a small cell application, we go out, we look, our engineers assess, does it need to be replaced? The one you're referring to, I'm not sure who that carrier was. Was it an Extenet or who came out and, according to you, ignored or wasn't concerned. My colleague, David Lemondol, and I often were on a first name basis with many public works commissioners across, Verizon's New York footprint on double poles or aesthetic concerns with individual poles. And we asked for photos. Again, I spent a lot of years as a technician, so I know safety and soundness of our plant out there. We will take those pictures and get them into our operations team for assessment and correction if needed, regardless if there's a small cell on there or not. But certainly before we allow anyone else to attach, we take a good look at every single one of those poles to ensure, safety and soundness of that attachment. And lastly, and Chair, you may remember while in your role as Chief of Staff for Assemblymember Fahey, there was a claim and there was an article in the Times-Union 2 years ago about a homeowner up in Buckingham Pond area coming home and finding this new pole. When the facts were collected, frankly, that really wasn't the story. The pole was placed by Extenet, Verizon, as a tenant on that pole. It was a new pole, so those are very sensitive. I mean, I'm a homeowner. You don't want anything new, existing. To Maggie's point, you might not even know somebody came out and put a note up on top because the pole was there and the wires were there. But a brand new pole in your front yard, once we did the investigation, the city was well aware. It was permitted. It was staked out in concert with the building department, and door tags were placed on the property, the properties nearby, notifying them of the work that was about to occur. So there's a dig, not to get too deep into it, but there's a dig safe process even for setting aerial plant. The pole was in the ground. Dig Safe New York was called. So there were markings done, notifications were made, and the story really, in Verizon's position, was really lacking some facts before it went to press.
I do recall.
That's a good
Thank
point
you.
that you brought up. Can I jump in real fast? That's a good point you brought up. I'm wondering in our requirements, should we have, when the equipment's installed, there should be some kind of name tag at Verizon that if there is a problem, we know right away who to, contact. To me, that'd be very minor to put like a name on it and maybe even a contact number if there's a problem. I don't know if you do that in other cities or not.
Yeah, we have. There's examples, and I'd again I'd be glad to share some pictures of some of that notification that we have utilized in other markets that I thought it was a good idea.
Okay, Tom, you're all set, right? I think I saw Alfredo's hand up at one point. Go ahead, Alfredo.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that Verizon is taking the position of seeing wireless and internet service as a utility and not as a luxury. That it is a necessary utility for our population. So I'm glad to hear Verizon is taking that stance. If that's the stance that I'm hearing, specifically if we're looking to have, cooperations similar to what we have for utilities in electric and heating. I agree with that. I actually agree with that statement. I think it's something that, there's been some pushback from other industry leaders to not see wireless or broadband as a utility. So your statements give me some relief that Verizon's actually taking the lead in this position and change maybe some corporate stance on this. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Councilman Hoey spoke about and also what Councilwoman Duchette, I'm sorry, I mispronounced your name, Judy, spoke about with AT&T, where there's a distrust from community with this industry. And part of it is because you stated that Verizon isn't in Albany because of governmental mistakes of the past. Well, I mean, I know this governmental body has asked for Verizon to come before us in the past to try to see how we could work out an agreement where we could bring Verizon to our neighborhoods. I understand Councilman Hoey's frustration because Councilman Hoey's neighborhood borders Guilderland. So if you go just 2 blocks, you are full access to Wi-Fi, and your cable bill, your internet bill, drops by like $15 to $20. And that's a reality of, you know, having competition and having a opportunity for choice. And we don't have that in our city. We don't have choice. We have a one single brand that we have to go with, and our prices for that are significantly higher. You know, we're talking about a 25% difference if you're looking at, you know, $50 versus $65 for the same product. You know, that residents are being forced to pay because they live 2 blocks from where Verizon services. So I like to welcome Verizon to bring back that conversation and maybe correct errors from the past to encourage Verizon to come to our city because our residents would like to have a choice. Our residents would like to have an option, and right now we don't. So I like to put that on the table because I think that's something that would ease some of the costs that our residents are feeling just instantly without the additional support that I do be in support that you spoke about. The other question I wanted to ask specifically had to do with K-12. I know you spoke about your higher educational partnerships. I'd like to get a little bit more information about what partnerships you would be looking to do or you have done specifically with our school district. Because a lot of our young people over the last year and a half have really struggled because they didn't have the access or the broadband needed to be competitive academically. So I'd be interested to hear what you've done and what you're looking to do with this partnership.
So the partnership that we have currently with SUNY Albany, it's actually managed through Crown Castle. It's very convoluted and I won't go into it, but we're putting, and we have this in probably about a dozen or so universities across upstate New York, where we kind of come in and install an enhanced wireless system that's specifically dedicated for inside the buildings. So we have like one location where we put all of our equipment, and then we run cables, like cable, fiber and power to a series of antennas and remotes that are put in utility closets and in hallways. And it basically just enhances the coverage inside of these buildings. For more of like an academic partnership thing, I mean, we're not the right people to talk to about that, but I can certainly reach out to you outside of this meeting and get you some more information on that if that's what you would like to see. But we have partnered with universities to kind of do test bed types of things where we give them enhanced services, and then they work with our promotions department to kind of get some equipment to test services, and we work with them on feedback, and it's a whole separate group at Verizon that handles all that. But we do have a lot of partnerships with a lot of universities and colleges for enhanced services on their campuses, and SUNY Albany happens to be one right now that we are just finishing, I think, a couple of the first buildings. So this one just came about this year, so it's relatively new.
I look forward to getting some more information about your K-12 initiatives because that's where we really saw the lag. Our universities and our higher ed institutions, yes, they had their struggles as well, but I know they also had some resources. Our K-12, you know, those are the families in our neighborhoods that we really want to make sure have the resources as well.
So on the K through 12 space, Verizon, there are E-rate programs, but specific to Verizon Foundation and philanthropy, Verizon Innovative Learning Schools. There are none in Albany currently, but where we do have the network built out, dozens down in the 5 boroughs. Just 2 weeks ago in Norwalk, Connecticut, we made a major announcement with 4 schools there, and they were this year's VILS, we call them Verizon Innovative Learning. They were VILS awardees. So not only do we bring the network to the schools, we then provide devices to the teachers and to the students and give them connectivity for the for the remainder of their time in those schools. Recognizing the need there, right? Again, back to our white paper. So, okay, we build a network. Now what? So in those schools, they applied, they were selected, and they were awarded with devices and no cost network. So is it every school in every city? No, but there's certainly millions and millions of dollars Verizon has donated to schools. They've got to apply. There's a grant process there and what have you. And it's been extremely well received in the markets where we have awarded schools.
My last question, I promise, Chair. I'd love to get the numbers in the Capital District and broken down by cities in the Capital District, because I'm a little greedy. I want to make sure my neighborhoods, I want to make sure my school district, I want to make sure, my community is also benefiting from these resources.
Is that something you folks can provide that information?
I mean, so I'm clear on the ask though, you're looking for schools that are VILS recipients in Albany?
Yes, in the city of Albany or in the Capital District, Albany County, Schenectady County, Westphalia County, even Saratoga County. Yes, I want specifically City of Albany, as well, but a good breakdown of how any funds were distributed in the capital regions.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Doche.
Well, actually, Kathy, I don't know if your particular point has been, that you raised has been really addressed by Verizon with regard. I would like you to pose that, and then I do have 2 other questions.
Okay, so the point I brought up with Singular Wireless was that a lot of the things that you're doing to bridge the digital divide are all very good, but there is no assurance in these franchise agreements that our underserved neighborhoods are going to have, these facilities are going to be deployed in our underserved neighborhoods. And that's what we're looking for, because hotspots are, good for a very short term, but it's like a Band-Aid. And as Alfredo was pointing out, you're helping various school districts, but again, not every school district. We want to make sure, we understand you're a business, but we care deeply about the residents in this city, and we want to make sure not only our school children in every neighborhood, but the adults in every neighborhood have access to the internet. And this, we're concerned that these franchise agreements don't give us that 100% assurance. So that was the point I raised. And that's something that I think I can say everyone on the council cares deeply about that.
So because this is a public forum, we wouldn't be able to disclose the build plans or the map offline. If we could meet with council, get some NDAs in place. I was able to take a look at the plan that Mark and Maggie have put together over the last few months. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised at what that map does entail.
Okay, that's something we would be interested in. Thank you, Chip. Judy, did you want to follow up?
Yes, and how quickly can we get non-disclosure agreements in place and have that and get that information? And I think that that's a question for Brett and JR. And I think that there's an exception in the open meetings law for that. Can we do that?
Off the top of my head, JR, do you recall if there was a sort of a executive session item for discussing like, trade or proprietary secrets? As far as NDAs go, I mean, I have a few NDA samples I could, put together pretty quickly, and Verizon or their counsel may have NDAs that we can get together in pretty short order, I assume. But
we do have a form of NDA that we can send over first thing in the morning for you to review. It's something that we commonly enter into with cities in discussion like this. And in fact, I believe the mayor's office has the ability to do that, to execute an NDA.
I think, frankly, I think that is something that probably there should be an acknowledgement that an NDA is then in place by anybody who's then having access to the information. I know that under the Freedom of Information Law, we can withhold, so information might be able to be shared with council members under NDA, and then there's a FOIL exception for Freedom of Information Law exception for contract negotiations if the disclosure would hamper contract negotiations. But I'm having a hard time coming up with the executive, whether there's a contract exception off the top of my head.
There is no contract exception. It's only when it's the sale or use of property and or securities.
So I think bottom line is we wouldn't be able to discuss it, but we could potentially we wouldn't be able to discuss it as a council or as a committee with a quorum present, but non-disclosure agreements could, and acknowledgements could be done, and then the information shared, and then there could be phone conversations with people on Verizon, maybe with one or two Common Council members individually. So I am interested in that as well. Mr. Lawrence, first time I was aware that 5G was being deployed in the city of Albany was when I got a text message from a constituent who had one of these sitting outside his front door in a city island. And he was like, what on earth is this? They are not, they don't add to, the attractiveness of the streetscape. So I just want to make that comment. I understand that our aesthetic standards are trying to control issues. Mr. Igo has had people one of our council members in the 14th ward where poles have suddenly appeared in somebody's front yard, and they're not happy about that. So I just want to caution you against anybody minimizing the potential impact, and for you to understand, people choose Albany to live in Albany, and they want to protect it and make it as livable walkable as possible. So there, some of the design standards, the aesthetic standards really relate to safety, not putting a pole in the middle of a sidewalk. We don't want it in our parks, for example, without there being, I think, specific agreement that there's a real need there for it, and that there's a very specific benefit. Mr. Brennan, the language regarding the fees. So the fees are set by the FCC. There's some question about whether the FCC has actually set the fees so that they're absolutely not negotiable. That's my first question on this, and then I'd like to talk about the language and in the event the FCC changes its stance.
Certainly. So my recollection of the FCC order was they set a presumptive fee that is presumptively reasonable and equates to what is cost recovery for the use of the right-of-way. And so the language in the agreement does, I'm trying to scroll back up amongst the different things on my screen, does have on the bottom of page 6 into the top of 7 that if that FCC order is subsequently superseded and impacts what is the presumptively reasonable provisions for fees, that that the agreement is subject to renegotiation on those fees. And I was not able to scroll through the 100 pages.
Can I stick with point 1?
Sure.
Point 1. So presumptive reasonable. So presumptive reasonable from my law school days does not mean it is hard and fast.
I have the FCC order pulled up here if I can jump in. The FCC guidance, I should say. It's paragraph 79 on the guidance document, and it says, we presume that the following fees would not be prohibited by section 253 or section 332C7. A, $500 for non-recurring fees, including a single upfront application that includes up to 5 small wireless facilities, with an additional $100 for each small wireless facility beyond 5, or $1,000 for non-recurring fees for a new pole, i.e. not a co-location intended to support 1 or more wireless facilities. And then it also says the $270 per year for all recurring fees. So it says the FCC is presuming that the following fees would not be prohibited. I understand what you're saying, Councilwoman Dochette, but on the other hand, setting up any fees outside of those numbers that the FCC has proposed, I think we'd certainly be opening up ourselves to litigation that we would stand a good chance of losing if we were to go outside of those numbers. It does say presume, I understand that, but personally, I think it's safest to remain within those FCC guidelines.
Do we have a sense, though, Brett, of how much it is costing the city in order to, be the administrator for all of this? That would be helpful for us to have.
I don't have those numbers as I sit here today. Maybe that would be probably have to combine data from planning and DGS and some other departments to figure that out. But again, I mean, I think these are the numbers that essentially every municipality within the state and the United States have to, or are likely going to abide by. And I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Brennan, if you had anything you wanted to add to that. I just happened to have the FCC guidance pulled up.
David, did you have anything else?
I'm looking at that same section, and those are the presumptively reasonable fees. And it does. I'm sure you'll go in and look at it at your. Sounds like my children just got home. I apologize. It says that if you want to prevail in a Section 253 challenge, there has to be a showing that the fees charged are a reasonable approximation of cost. Those costs themselves are reasonable and non-discriminatory, and basically it's limited to cost recovery. So I do believe that if there's a showing that there's something above that, that would be the way to go about it.
So follow-up question to that is, so presumptive reasonable means that I'm taking that as if the FCC were asked to weigh in on something that a municipality is going to charge and the fees were under or at that amount or under, then the FCC, if they were being asked to weigh in on it, would then say, essentially it would be then, I think, not challengeable by a utility to say, oh, these are unreasonable fees. But is there a requirement that the FCC approve fees in all cases, or is it only if there is a disagreement between the potentially contracting parties?
Sure. So I don't believe that there is a requirement or that the FCC is going to weigh in on individual fees. I think that that requirement speaks to if there is a disagreement between a wireless company and a municipality, that then, and it goes to federal court, that's the standard by which the federal court would undertake the analysis. It's not as if we go to the FCC. Excuse me for 1 second.
Oh gosh. We look forward. It's great. It's great being able to work from home, and then sometimes it's not so great being able to work from home. So I did have a follow-up about the contractual language on that, and I'll wait for Mr. Brennan. Oh, Mr. Brennan, you're back.
I'm back. I've gone out and regulated and returned quickly. Sounds like the children are home from dance and lacrosse or something fun like that.
So my follow-up question then does have to do with the agreement. So the agreement makes it pretty clear that if the FCC sets different rates, then there would be the ability to open up the agreement and negotiate that particular issue. Are you in agreement with that?
Yes, I am.
All right. So, but then my separate question is, if the FCC basically says actually, I think it was saying, gosh, I got to bring up the, do you read the agreement as basically locking us into then what the new FCC rate would be? Presumptive, however they characterize it.
It says that it would be subject to negotiation, but I think it would be subject to negotiation within the terms of whatever the change in the law would be. So I don't know that I could presume to see what the FCC may or may not do. At one point in time, there was going back in the not too distant history, there was this FCC order and it was challenged, and that challenge went to something like the Ninth Circuit out west, and the Ninth Circuit upheld the FCC order. So some of the language when we were negotiating these agreements there was some uncertainty of whether the FCC order would be upheld or not, and it has been upheld. But then there's also built into this is the potential that that FCC order may change at some point in the future. So there's basically what I would consider a reopener, that if there was a change in law or guidance, this is more than guidance, of FCC orders, that we would be able to reopen. And it's subject to negotiation because it wasn't clear to any of us whether it would be a presumptive cap set as it is now, or if there's some other potential out there that's not a cap. And so I think it's left open for renegotiation if that circumstance comes to be.
Yeah, so the language that is a little concerning to me, in the event, essentially what the FCC says is these rates, you know, if they clarify that the rates can be based upon local considerations and et cetera, and they don't actually establish a new rate, I'm a little bit concerned that the language that basically says if a federal, state, or county legislative, regulatory, judicial, or other action affects the rights or obligations of the parties or establishes rates, then you can look to negotiate the terms on written notice. By saying it establishes rates, that's different than gives flexibility to the municipality to establish the rate. You see what I mean?
I'm reading it again, and I was trying to keep up with where you were. I get, I'm trying to follow along with your concern. I guess my belief is that if the language is set up that it's subject to negotiation, it's protective of both sides. If there is room, if it's not just a cap. I mean, right now the presumptive rate is $270 a year. It was up to $270 a year, and so those were the terms that were discussed. I suppose it could be up to some other number that would be subject to negotiation. I don't know that I see it going down, but the idea would be to build in some flexibility, not being able to clearly identify what might come down in the future. So if there's some need to adjust that language as the council looks at it, I think we could certainly take a look at that and see if there's a suggested revision.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
It does say, if I may add, that either party may, upon 30 days written notice, require that the fees required under this section be renegotiated to conform with the new law. So, I mean, I think that provides a degree of flexibility there.
I think that I'm hearing our council and their council basically saying that under the circumstances that I'm suggesting, that there would be able to be a renegotiation. Whether that renegotiation is successful is another matter, but thank you.
Okay, I guess, Maggie, was there anything else you were intending to go over?
No, not really. I just, I wanted to make sure that you guys had the PowerPoint. It does have a lot of good information on small cells, and the future of wireless trends and why these small cells are so important to bring into communities. So I just wanted to make sure that that was distributed, and I wanted to touch on the aesthetics of these small cells that we're deploying. So no, I mean, unless there's any specific questions, I think that I'm set from my end.
Okay, and just other council members, anybody else have any questions or comments before we wrap up?
Yeah.
Owusu.
Yeah.
Councilmember Anani.
Hey, David. Hey, Verizon. Hey, everybody else. I just want to say, the fact that we're having this conversation is a step in the right direction. And I just want to thank you guys for coming to the table and having a conversation with the executive and also the legislative body for the city. And just hearing Chip earlier, I am very optimistic that we are going to address the digital divide. And it takes, sometimes, it might seem like the needle is not moving, but it is. And I think that these type of conversation is needed to address it. So I just want to thank, Verizon, I also want to thank AT&T too, with the discussion that we're having. I know we have to make a few amendments and few languages, but again, ultimately, we want to make sure that internet is affordable and also reliable. We've been talking about affordability, but also one of the things that we haven't been talking about is make the reliability of making sure that everyone in our city have that access. Spectrum Greed has made it very clear that they do not want to provide quality and affordable internet to the residents of the city of Albany. And the only way forward is competition, whether it's Verizon, AT&T, or the city of Albany having our own municipal run internet. That is the only way we're gonna make sure that internet access and broadband access is affordable and reliable. So I just want to thank everyone and for the opportunity to come in front of us and just have this meaningful discussions. I know there were some tough questions, but again, we all represent our constituents, and these are some of the questions that they want us to ask, particularly when it comes to equity and how some of these towers are going to be located. So I just want to thank everyone.
Well, that was a great wrap up, Owusu. What we'll do is, I think there's a lot of information here and people want to digest it, committee members and other council members. And if we have any questions, we'll reach out to you and we'll invite you back. And, we're not ready to make I think we need more time on this. So we'll get back in touch with you with, our next meeting date on this issue. And we thank all of you for coming today. And Judy, I see you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I just want to note that we do have the ordinance on the agenda. I'm a little challenged, like I said, with my eyesight right now to deal with the details of it. But I was realizing today when I went to pull out what Brett sent to you and me, Kathy, because of our prior discussion on this with some amendments, that was not shared with the committee members. So I think it's appropriate for, well, maybe it was, I don't.
Well, let's have
sure
that conversation in a few minutes, and we'll, move on to the next part of our meeting. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So again, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for all you folks from Verizon Wireless. And we will be back in touch with a new meeting date.
Great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Thank you, the rest of the council members. We will get you some follow-up that we talked about. We'll get to the NDA. We have one in place.
Excellent.
We'll check with our attorneys to see if it's still valid for the city to include the council. We've already shipped off the photos of the poll in question, Councilman, that JR just shared. I've already sent them off to the ops team for investigation. We'll take a look and let's keep the dialogue open. And like I said, Verizon's looking forward to bringing, our own money investing into this city, and every single constituent of yours will benefit greatly in doing so.
That sounds great, and we'll look forward to following up with you on all of that, Chip. Thank you so much.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay.